You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network. For more quality options programs, visit www.theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app, available in iTunes and on Google Play.
The options market can be a confusing place. Sorting through the daily avalanche of data, alerts, updates, articles, and analysis to find the most important information is an overwhelming prospect. But now you have help. Welcome to the Options News Rundown, the only program that breaks through the noise to bring you the most important news and information from the world of options. Every day, we bring you the top 5 option stories curated by the options experts at theoptionsinsider.com, the premier source for options information. The Options News Rundown is brought to you by Market Taker Mentoring, the leader in options trading education. Get trader education, daily trade ideas, and more with a free 1-week trial of Market Taker Mentoring's Live Advantage Group coaching class by visiting markettaker.com/insider. And now it's time to break through the noise. It's time for your Options News Rundown.
Good morning. Today is Wednesday, February 13th, 2019. This is your Options News Rundown. I'm Dan Passarelli. Our first story of the day is from investing.com. It's the top 5 things to know in the market on Wednesday. First thing to know today is Trump hints at delaying new tariffs on China. Markets will be keeping abreast of trade discussions between the U.S. and China to see if any more news materializes amid recent signs the world's 2 biggest economies are working to resolve their differences. U.S. Treasury Stephen Mnuchin, along with U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer, arrived in Beijing on Tuesday. The two are scheduled to hold talks on Thursday and Friday with Vice Premier Liu He, the top economic advisor to Xi. Washington and Beijing are trying to hammer out a deal ahead of the March 1st deadline when U.S. tariffs on $200 billion worth of Chinese imports are scheduled to increase to 25% from 10%. U.S. President Donald Trump said on Tuesday that he could be tempted to push back the deadline if the two sides were close to a deal. Second thing to know is pre-open, U.S. futures pointing to a higher open. U.S. stock futures pointing to a higher open, as optimism over the U.S.-China trade deal lifted sentiment. Elsewhere, European stocks were higher, with most bourses across the region in positive territory. Earlier, Asian shares closed mostly higher, with stocks in China and Japan leading gains across the region. The third thing to know is Cisco highlights another busy day of earnings. In earnings, most of the focus will be on Cisco Systems, which reports after the bell. The company is expected to post earnings per share of 72 cents on revenue of $12.41 billion, according to analysts polled by investing.com. Other high-profile names releasing quarterly earnings today include Teva, AIG, Yelp, Fossil Group, Marathon Oil, Gannett, Hilton, Hyatt, Dish Network, and NetApp. The fourth thing to know today is U.S. inflation data is in focus. On the data front, the Commerce Department will publish January CPI figures at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Consumer prices are expected to have risen 0.1% last month, according to estimates. On a yearly base, CPI is projected to climb 1.5%. Excluding the cost of food and fuel, core inflation prices are forecast to have gained 0.2% last month and 2.1% over the prior year. Speeches from Cleveland Fed President Loretta Mester, Atlanta Fed President Raphael Bostic, and Philly Fed boss Patrick Harker will also be in focus. The U.S. dollar index was at 96.60. It hit a 2019 high of $97 a day earlier. In the bond market, U.S. Treasury prices were little changed, with the benchmark 10-year yield at 2.68%. while the yield on U.S. government bonds with 2-year maturities was at 2.51%. EIA oil supply report is the fifth thing to know today. In commodity markets, the U.S. Energy Information Administration will release its official weekly oil supplies report for the week ended February 8th at 10:30 a.m. Eastern. Analysts expect the EIA to report a rise of around 2.6 million barrels in crude supplies. If confirmed, it would be the fourth straight weekly build in domestic oil inventories. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude futures were up 57 cents, or roughly 1%, at $53.67 a barrel. International Brent crude oil futures were at $63.27 per barrel. That's up 85 cents, or about 1.3%. In its closely watched monthly report, the International Energy Agency said the global oil market will struggle this year to absorb fast-growing crude supply from outside OPEC, even with the group's production cuts and U.S. sanctions on Venezuela and Iran. Our second story today comes by way of CNBC.com. Mortgage applications dropped 3.7% as home buyers pull back. The lowest interest rates in nearly a year were not enough incentive to juice mortgage demand. Total mortgage application volume fell 3.7% last week compared with the previous week, according to the Mortgage Bankers Association's seasonally adjusted index. Volume was 11% lower than a year ago, even though rates were only a tiny bit higher then. The drop-off was primarily in applications to purchase a home. They fell 6% for the week and were 5% lower than a year ago. Some real estate agents have been reporting more traffic at open houses as more listings come on the market. But apparently that interest is not turning into demand for home loans. Prices are still very high, and the supply of lower-end homes is still very lean. Mortgage rates are lower than they were last fall, but not enough to really make a difference for some home buyers. Our third story today is from MarketWatch.com. Inflation flatlines in January thanks to lower gas prices, CPI shows. The cost of consumer goods and services were unchanged in January, largely thanks to falling gas prices and another sign inflation poses little threat to the economy right now. The Consumer Price Index was flat last month, the government said Wednesday. Economists polled by MarketWatch had forecast a 0.1% advance. What's more, the increase in the cost of living over the past 12 months slowed to 1.6% from 1.9%. That's the smallest gain in half a year, reflecting a downswing in inflation that began toward the end of last summer. The CPI was rising at an almost 3% rate as recently as July. And our final story today is from marketvoice.fia.org. Miami International to launch a third options market. On March 1st, Miami International Holdings will launch its third options market, the 16th such venue in an increasingly crowded field. The new market, called MIAX Emerald, continues the company's strategy of adopting the evolution of market structure in the U.S. equity options marketplace. The launch was previously planned for February, but the U.S. government shutdown curtailed operations of the Securities and Exchange Commission and delayed approval. Final testing is scheduled for February 23rd, barring another lapse in government funding. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is news you can use for today, Wednesday, February 13th, 2019, your Options News Rundown. I'm Dan Passarelli. Trade smart, and have a great day.
The Options News Rundown is brought to you by Market Taker Mentoring, the leader in options trading education. Get trader education, daily trade ideas, and more with a free 1-week trial of Market Taker Mentoring's Live Advantage Group coaching class by visiting markettaker.com/insider.
The preceding program was a production of the Options Insider Radio Network. For more quality options programs, visit www.theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app, available in iTunes and on Google Play. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions@theoptionsinsider.com.